This is part 2 of the explanation for some of the 1.2 Aplia exercise assignments. All right, let's look at conditional statements. So conditional statements are special kinds of statements that we'll talk a lot more about when we get to chapter 6 and 7. And what they do is they try to build a link between what's called the antecedent, or the first part of the conditional, the part that follows if, and the consequent, the second part of a conditional, the part that typically follows then. And on their own, conditional statements are not really arguments. They look like arguments in some sense because they're trying to build a link between one thing and another, so it looks like a kind of inference is being made, but they're always hypothetical. They provide no factual content on their own. They're just saying, hey, if something was the case, then here's what would follow. So because they're missing the factual claim of an argument, they're never really going to make the cut. Now later on, when we get to arguments, we're going to see that conditional statements are often used in arguments to help them work, but on their own are not technically arguments themselves. All right, so what they want me to do is complete the following sentences about conditional statements. So this is going to require me looking at some of that information in section 6.2. The two parts of a conditional statement are known as the antecedent and the consequent. In an if-then statement, the antecedent follows the what part, right? So there I need to look and see. I already know it's the if part. As I work my way through the rest of this stuff, all right, more information about it. More important down here, and this is kind of shadowing what's coming up next, is this business about necessary and sufficient conditions. All right. Consider the following conditional statement. Then complete the answers about appropriate blah, 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 and then the necessary and sufficient condition. So if Hulk Hogan was the world heavyweight champion, then Hulk Hogan is a professional wrestler. What this says is that if this first part is true, that's sufficient for this next part being true. That is that if the first part's true, it guarantees the next part is true. So I want me to say what the antecedent is. Well, the antecedent is the part that follows if, the first part of a conditional. So I'm going to say Hulk Hogan was the world heavyweight champion. All right, that's done. What are the necessary and sufficient conditions in the given conditional statement? Well, here's the deal. Whatever follows if, the antecedent of a conditional statement, that's going to be the sufficient condition. The thing that if that's true, it guarantees something else is going to be true. So a sufficient condition is Hulk Hogan was the world heavyweight champion. And I should probably put a space there. Or not. Maybe it doesn't want me to. Okay, weird. And the necessary condition is going to be the part that follows then. And we'll talk more about this later in the next section. But the way I think about necessary condition, and it works pretty well for me, is that it's the thing that if it's not true, it guarantees that the other part of your conditional is also not true. Like if you don't do that thing, that necessary thing, then you're not going to get the other part. So when I read, if Hulk Hogan was a world heavyweight champion, that means he was a professional wrestler. Well, the way to think about this in terms of necessary conditions is that, well, if he's not a professional wrestler, then it's got to follow that he wasn't the world heavyweight champion. Being a professional wrestler is necessary for this part of it. So the part that follows then in a conditional statement is going to be your necessary condition. So Hulk Hogan is a professional wrestler. That's necessary for him being the heavyweight champion. Is a professional wrestler. Okay. Grade that, can mix all those, and then down here, that's correct. All right, let's talk then about necessary and sufficient conditions in more detail. All right, so in the book, they give some brief explanation of this. I provided some additional notes on this in the course webpage for you to check out on necessary and sufficient conditions, so please look at those things because I think it gives a much better explanation of what's going on. But for each of these, they're going to complete the following statements about necessary and sufficient conditions, then convert the statements into standard if-then conditional statements that express the same relationship. All right, so having a daughter is a blank condition for being a parent. What they're asking me there is, okay, is having a daughter a requirement for being a parent in the sense that if I don't have a daughter, that means I can't be a parent? Right? That's the way to think about necessary conditions. If it isn't met, does that mean I don't get what I want? So here I want to be a parent. If I don't have a daughter, does that mean I don't get what I want? And I want to say no, right? Because I could have a son and still be a parent. It doesn't guarantee that I'm not a parent if I don't have a daughter. So that means having a daughter is not necessary. because I could still be a parent even if I don't have a daughter. Like, right, I got a son. But I should think about this. If I do have a daughter, well, that automatically means I am a parent, right? That means it's sufficient. Having a daughter is sufficient for being a parent, because if I have a daughter, that follows I am a parent. All right. So if I put this in a conditional form, then it's going to be if you have a daughter, then you are a parent. All right, let's go down here and see if we can't find a necessary one. Being made of metal is a blank condition for being made of copper. Okay, so here I'm going to be asking myself, well, if I'm made of metal, does that mean automatically I'm made of copper? No, I guess, because I could be like cobalt or titanium or all sorts of other types of metal, right, besides just copper. So being metal doesn't guarantee I'm made of copper. That means it's not sufficient. Now I should ask, well, if I'm not made of metal, does that guarantee that I'm not made of copper? And there I want to say yes, right? If I'm not metal, then I'm not copper. To be copper, I must first be metal. That means that being metal is a necessary condition for being made of copper. And so now I got to remember, all right, the necessary part of a conditional is going to be the part that follows then. So being made of metal, and the other part is the copper part. And so here it should also make sense that if I'm copper, that's sufficient for being made of metal. It follows my rule that what follows if is sufficient and what follows then is necessary. All right. And then arguments, non-arguments, this last one here quickly. Examine the following passages. Each passage is either an argument or non-argument. Use the drop-down menu to indicate whether the passage is an argument or a specific type of non-argument. So this is just a little bit more complicated than earlier, where they told you it wasn't an argument, or they asked you whether it was one of 3 separate kinds of non-arguments. Now I have to use all that. Is it an argument first off? And if it isn't, what specific type of non-argument isn't, right? So they're going to give me all this different stuff down here. So just the first one as an example. I believe that the time has come for change, that we should rise up in unison and declare the beginning of a new era, and that we should hold on to lessons for the past while lessons of the past while blazing a new path. All right. That kind of looks like an argument in the sense that, well, it looks like somebody's trying to convince me of something. But note here that there's no sort of factual claims that support the inferential reasoning in this. I believe that the time has come for change. Okay, that looks like that's something that could be true, and maybe that is true. That we should rise up in unison, more of what you think, and that we should hold on to lessons of the past while blazing a new path. All right, so there's really no inferential meat to this thing. He's not trying to show me why, because some other things are true, that must make something else true. So it's a non-argument. It doesn't have the inferential claim of an argument that it needs. And I have to figure out then, well, what is this? What are they doing here? And what I think this most looks like, rather than being a set of loosely associated statements, I think there's more going on here than just loose association. This is somebody's statement of belief or opinion, right? They're telling me what they happen to think about something. But they're not giving me an argument for it, why I should think this too, or what are their own reasons for thinking this. They're just telling me what they happen to think. That's not an argument. That's a statement of belief or opinion. All right, and you go through and do the rest for the rest of these. And that wraps up the 1.2 Aplia exercise videos.